1910 to 1913. King Edward VII died on 6 May 1910, and 6 months later, Lord Hardinge was appointed Viceroy. At the close of 1911, he welcomed King George V and Queen Mary to India and to the fabulous Darbar at Delhi. The king had already visited India as Prince of Wales in 1905, and he had talked with many of the leaders, among them Gopal Krishna Gokhale. Sir Walter Lawrence, a veteran in Indian affairs, wrote of their meeting. At one of the large receptions, the prince had retired to an alcove for 5 minutes' rest. I saw in the throng an old friend of mine, a great Indian, Mr. Gokhale. I took him into the alcove and introduced him to the Prince of Wales. After a few words, the prince said, I have been reading your speech at Benares in which you said that it would be better for India if the Indians had a much larger part in the administration. I have now been traveling for some months in India and I have never seen a happier looking people. Would the peoples of India be happier if you ran the country? Mr. Gokhale replied, No, sir, I do not say that they would be happier, but they would have more self respect. That may be, said the prince, but I cannot see how there can be real self respect while the Indians treat their women as they do now. Yes, said Mr. Gokhale, that is a great blot. The prince had continued his journey, enjoying the sight of an ornate temple here, there a lovely mosque. That the temple was Hindu and the mosque Mohammedan did not seem to disturb him, and thus he missed the chief cause of friction in India. But he echoed his father's humanism. In some notes that he wrote when the journey was over, he admitted that he could not help being struck by the way in which all salutations by the natives were disregarded by the persons to whom they were given, and that he could not help noticing that the general bearing of the European towards the native was to say the least unsympathetic. This impression must have endured in his incredible memory in 1910, when plans were being made for his second visit and for the Darbar. He laid it down that all classes should have a chance of seeing him close at hand. At the end of the Darbar, when the Viceroy had finished his speech, the king, to the surprise of all, himself rose and in a clear voice proclaimed the division of the partition of Bengal and the transference of the capital to Delhi. There is no record of Muhammad Ali Jinnah's feelings over the division, which was a victory for the Hindu controlled Congress and a sorrow for the Muslim League. The Muslims could no longer hope that the British could protect them against the superior forces of the Hindus, and the Muslim League could no longer be justified in a policy described by Mrs. Naidu as too narrow and too nebulous. At their next session in December 1912, which Jinnah attended, the League proposed to amend their constitution so that it would ally them with Congress in a common demand for Swaraj. Muhammad Ali Jinnah spoke at this meeting of the Muslim League from which he had so far kept apart because of its exclusively sectarian aims. But he no doubt felt justified in supporting the proposed changes in the League's constitution, since it would reconcile the League with the policy of Congress, the policy of the greater national welfare to which he was pledged. Jinnah's chief work remained with the Congress and the Imperial Legislative Council. There are records of two speeches he made in 1912 before the council. The first in March was on the subject of police administration. The second in April was in support of Gokhale's elementary education bill. Half a century before, Syed Ahmad Khan had cried, educate, 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 and Aligarh University had been the answer. But Syed Ahmad Khan had relied on his own vision and will, and on a few rich Muslims and Englishmen who patronized his scheme, and he had produced an educated upper class of scholars who could share in the administration of the country. In 1912, Gokhale and Jinnah were pleading for the great sea of illiterates, the masses, for whom they wanted schools and compulsory education to be controlled and paid for by the state. They asked for elementary education through government grants, not private patronage. Jinnah's argument against those who opposed the bill was characteristics. He examined the protests and answered them one by one in a speech presented with the skill of a seasoned advocate. It was a long speech of almost 4,000 words. One passage dealing with finance reveals his method, the direct, persistent attack with which he was to wear down so many opponents in the future. If you have money, you will get teachers. If you have money, you will get school buildings. The real point is whether you have got the money or not. Now, sir, this is a very, very old story that you have no money. And all I can say is this: find money, find money, find money. I ask, is it such an insurmountable difficulty to get 3 crores of rupees from the imperial exchequer? Is it such a great gigantic feat to be performed for a country like India with its 300 millions of people? I say, sir, that there is nothing in that argument. I ask the government, I say, find the money if necessary, tax the people. But I shall be told that the people are already taxed. I shall be told that we shall be facing great unpopularity. My answer is that you must remove the reproach that is justly levelled against British rule, namely the neglect of elementary education. My answer is that it is the duty of every civilized government to educate masses. And if you have to face unpopularity, if you have to face a certain amount of danger, face it boldly in the name of duty. Jinnah was not ungenerous. He admitted India's debt to Britain for existing educational benefits and said, let me tell you that you have no better friends in this country. I mean the friends of the government than the educated classes of this country. We know the blessings of education. We have learned that from the British government. They have been the first to open our eyes to it. They have brought us up to this level when we can stand in the council and deliberate upon the affairs of our nation and of our country. Sometime at the beginning of 1913, the Viceroy proved his regard for Jinnah's talents by nominating him for a second term to the Imperial Legislative Council. He seemed to flourish immediately. With this encouragement, he made a number of speeches on the Indian Extradition Bill in March and in April, a long address on the Criminal Law Amendment Bill. He still spoke with the technique of the lawyer, but also as a stern keeper of the law. Some years later, the Raja of Mahmudabad said that Muhammad Ali Jinnah was no apostle of frenzy, a fact that was already apparent in these early debates. During his speech on the Criminal Law Amendment Bill, Jinnah said, I wish to express that every attempt on the part of my countrymen to undermine the authority of the government and to disturb law and order deserves the strongest condemnation and the highest punishment. Such malcontents were, he said, the biggest enemies of this country and its people. He continued, I believe in criticizing the government, freely and frankly, but at the same time, that it is the duty of every educated man to support and help the government when the government is right. Jinnah spoke then of those of his countrymen who were responsible for political crimes. Let those men who still have these misguided ideas, let those men who still have these hallucinations realize that by anarchism, by dastardly crimes, they cannot bring about good government. Let them realize that these methods have not succeeded in any country in the world and are not likely to succeed in India. Early in 1913, Jinnah achieved another success with his gift for argument, with the Musalman Waqf Validating Bill, which he had first introduced in March 1911. This measure, which received the Viceroy's assent on 7 March 1913, was of cardinal importance to the Muslims of India. As early as 1871, Mr. William Hunter had prepared a report on the subject. Are Indian Mussulmans, are they bound in conscience to rebel against the Queen? He wrote of the chronic sense of wrong which the Muslims suffered under British rule, and of the sad fate of the once rich and educated Muslim aristocracy, the poor heirs of the princes who had long ago enjoyed the roses and fountains of Delhi and Lahore. In every district, the descendant of some little line of princes sullenly and proudly eats his heart out among the roofless palaces and weed-choked tanks. Their houses swarm with grown-up sons and daughters, with grandchildren and nephews and nieces. and not one of the hungry crowd has a chance of doing anything for himself in life. They drag on a listless existence in patched up verandas or leaky outhouses, sinking deeper and deeper into a helpless abyss of debt, till the neighboring Hindu moneylender fixes a quarrel with them, and then in a moment a host of mortgages foreclose, and the ancient Mussalman family is suddenly swallowed up and disappears forever. The only way of saving the property of these bewildered and feckless Muslim landlords was by introducing into the law of British India the right of a Muslim to make a waqf, a form of trust known in Mohammedan law, by which the beneficiaries would be safe against the folly of any one member of the family, and which would provide security and an income to succeeding generations in perpetuity. Sir Syed Ahmad Khan had tried to introduce works for Muslims some years before, but he had failed. Muhammad Ali Jinnah took up the cause. He pleaded for the rights of the oppressed minority, arguing as a dispassionate lawyer, rather than a Muslim protesting on behalf of his own people. There was not a phrase that betrayed religious prejudice. He said, "The one objection which has been urged against this bill is the question of public policy. Now, the answer to that, sir, is a very simple one. What we have got to do is to administer the Mohammedan law to the Muslims and therefore to introduce the question of public policy, which is foreign to Islamic jurisprudence. To my mind, is outside the question, and there is no such thing as public policy of any kind so far as Mohammedan jurisprudence is concerned, to which the provisions of this bill are in any way opposed. I therefore give that simple answer to that point. The legal pattern of Jinnah's speech makes some of it obscure to the layman mind, but the force of his words is apparent all the way through. When the bill had been passed and received the Viceroy's assent, one of the first to congratulate him was Mrs. Sarojini Naidu. She wrote of this his first private and personal success as a legislator. His admirable skill and tact in piloting through such an intricate and controversial measure, the first instance of a bill passing into legislation on the motion of a private member, won him not only the appreciation of his colleagues, but also his first meed of general recognition from his co-religionists all over India, who, while still regarding him a little outside the orthodox pale of Islam, were so soon to seek his advice and guidance in their political affairs.